Hi, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be looking at the three core building blocks of Power Query. If you find Power Query sometimes confusing, most errors or cryptic M language messages come down to one thing: not understanding the core building blocks of Power Query. These are tables, lists, and records. Once you've mastered these, M language stops feeling like this mysterious code to something that finally clicks. So in this video, we're going to cover what tables, lists, and records really are, how they connect together and can be converted into each other, how to avoid common mistakes with M code, and if you stick around to the end, we'll look at a bonus tip when using IntelliSense to avoid duplicating function names. Okay, let's move into Excel. So once we're in Excel, we're going to open up the Power Query editor. A quick reminder on how to do this: we go to Data, Get Data drop-down, launch Power Query Editor, or we use the keyboard shortcut Alt and F12. We just need a small data set to illustrate some of the principles that I'm going to talk through. We could import these from an external source or even from a table or a range within this workbook. But just to illustrate that you can enter your own data directly into Power Query, we're just going to do a few lines into a table. So on the Home tab in Power Query Editor, we're going to go to Enter Data. This is going to create a new query with a table editor. So we're going to call this first name names. I'm just going to enter a few names in here. So we'll go for Ben, Tom, Sarah. We're also going to have age for these people. Just going to pop some ages in here. And we're going to hold the country that they're from. You can press F2, by the way, to edit these cells, just like in Excel. Okay, so we've got a small little data set here that's held within a table. We can give this table a name, so we're going to call it example table, and then we'll click OK. This is going to create our query for us with that data set in. You can see now we've got a table within Power Query, which has got a source step that uses table from rows and a JSON document. A little tip if you're unsure what your data type is for this. So we know this is a table, but one way to confirm is to go to Add Step. And then we can do Value.Type, put in our source, press enter, and then you can see the result of that is a table. So we know for sure we've got a table format here. Now each of these columns within this table behave like a list. So we've effectively got three lists within this table, which are the columns: names, age, and country. And each row within the table is a record. So again, we've got three records, one for Ben, one for Tom, and one for Sarah. And the combination of those lists and records creates the table. So I'm just going to demonstrate a list. I'm going to right click on our queries. I'm going to go New Query, Other Sources, Blank Query. I'm going to right click on it, rename. We're going to call this Example List. Now to create a simple list of these three, Ben, Tom, and Sarah, we could purely go equals in the formula bar. We're going to use these curly brackets which define lists, similar to in Excel. So we can start typing within this list now. We could type Ben and make sure it's in double quotes, and then we're going to separate each item within this list with a comma. Then we're going to go for Tom, and then we're going to go for Sarah. So this is going to give us a list of Ben, Tom, and Sarah, which if we flick back to the table and onto our source step, this is what we see in that first column of that table. So column number one of the table is effectively the list of Ben, Tom, and Sarah. Now if you think of a list as just a simple ordered collection of data, like a row of boxes on a desk, each box can hold a value, and you can grab each value or the contents of each of those boxes by the order that they're lined up on your desk. So where we've got our list there, we could put in curly brackets and the index position. So if I was to put 0, this is going to return Ben, because Ben is at position number 1 within our list. And Power Query uses 0-based indexing, which means it starts counting from 0 rather than 1. So if we commit that by pressing enter, you can see now we've drilled down into the first item within that list. And just to demonstrate, if we were to put 1, we get Tom, and 2, we'd get Sarah. Equally, if we were to add in another step, so if we pressed add step, and we've got our source. We could also add our curly brackets after this in a new step, and we could put 0 to access the first record, just like we did within the initial source step. Let's have a look at an example of a record. So again, we're going to go new query, blank query, and I'm going to rename this to be example record. We're going to start typing in our steps. We're going to put equals. Now this time we need to use square brackets because square brackets denote records. So the syntax format for this is going to be put name for the first type of record, and we're going to say equals in double quotes Ben. Then we're going to put a comma to separate out to the next row within that record. We're going to say age equals 50. We're not going to use double quotes on this because we're going to store it as a number. You only need the double quotes if it's a text-based item. Comma, country equals double quotes UK. So now if we commit that, you can see we've got 3 rows, and each row within this record shows the result for that field. So this is a record, and if we flip back to the table that we originally had, you can see, go to the source step, this is effectively row 1 of the table holding Ben 50 UK, and that's why each row of a table is a record. Perhaps if you imagine a record like a business card, it's just a single business card for a single business that gives you all the details of that business. So within our table, this is like my business card that gives you all the details about me. Similar to a list, we can access particular fields within the record by adding to the end of our formula. So if we were to wrap in square brackets this time, not curly, if we were to say we wanted to get the age field within that record, we press enter, you can see now we've drilled down into that particular result. And just to do a demonstration similar to how we did with a list, we can also add an extra step where we're pointing at a source, and we could put in a field name within square brackets, and you get the results again. So hopefully you're starting to see how a table is just simply a list of records that share the same field names, and that's why we can treat columns as lists and rows as records within a table. I'm just going to demonstrate how we could convert records into a table. I'm going to do another blank query. We're going to call this one example Record.ToTable. Within our formula bar, we can use the Table.FromRecords function. If we open that, it's asking for records as a list. So we know that to do a list, we need to use the curly brackets. And then within a record, we need to use square brackets. So I'm just going to pull down a row here. Within square brackets, we're going to put name equals Ben, and then separate the fields. I'm going to go country equals UK. And then to separate out those records within that list, we use a comma again. I'm just going to shift and enter to go down a row. Just going to copy that one above. This time we'll go Tom, USA. And then we just need our curly brackets to close our list and our parenthesis to close our table from records. Now this should create a table from those 2 records. There we go, we've got a nice little table. Just put an extra comma after Tom by mistake there. That gives us names as columns, countries as columns, and Ben as Tom as records within that table. So that's a demonstration how your records form part of your table and how to convert from records to a table. Hopefully the concept of tables, records and lists is now starting to become clear. So let's have a look at some magic on how we can convert between them. We're going to convert Table.Column to list. So here we could use Table.Column. Table.Column asks for a table, so we could use our example table from our first example, and then it needs column as text. So if we wanted to extract the names column within that table, we flick back to the example table. Names was our first column. So if we wanted to get hold of that, type in double quotes, names as it's asking for it as text, close our parenthesis on our Table.Column function, and then you can see we've extracted a list from that initial column within this example table here. So that's how to convert from a table column to a list. Similar to table from record, we can convert a record to a table. And to do that, we're going to use Record.ToTable. So with Record.ToTable, it asks for a record as a record. Exactly the same as we did before. I'll do this quickly. We're just going to create a record which needs to be in square brackets. I'm just going to go name equals Ben, separated by a comma for the next field in that record. Just going to do country equals UK. Close our record with our square brackets, close our Record.ToTable, and then we've got a nice little table showing that record. Finally, we're going to look at how we can go from a table to records. So if we rename this, convert table to records, start typing equals table to records. So it's asking for a table. We can use our example table again. That's all we need for this. We press enter. You can see now we've got a list of records, and each of these rows within the list simply says record. What we can do is we can click on each of these records to peek into the fields within that record. So you can see that's the first row or first record within the table, Ben 50 UK. And then if we peek into the second record, we should get Tom 20 USA. So you can see what that's done just by clicking on that record is it's provided that zero-based index. If you remember, 0 is row 1. If we press 1, that means we should pull row 2 from our records list, which should be Tom. And there we get it, Tom 20 USA, so that's Tom's record. Just on those first two earlier examples, you can also use the indexing to pull positions. We just illustrate this on the Table.Column where we were pulling out a list from our initial table column. Note Tom is on row 2, which is position 1 in the index. So if we put 1, we'd get Tom. Hopefully that's cleared up how we start with a table. We can narrow it down to a record within that table or a row, and then we can narrow it down to a specific field within that record or a column. That's the consistent logic behind Power Query. So just one final thing to note is you can have nested lists within lists. So I'm going to do another blank query just so we can see what a nested list looks like. If I was to start a list like we did earlier, we're going to put Ben, Tom, Sarah. Now within here, if we put another curly bracket before and after Ben, then if we press comma, so now we're within this list within our lists. And if I was to put 50, and then if we press enter, so you can see now we get the list like we initially saw on our example list query. Go back to the source, Ben, Tom, Sarah, like this. However, instead of seeing Ben on the first row within this list, we see list because there's a nested list within that list. And if I click on that list to peek into it, you can then see the results of that nested list show Ben 50, like we've demonstrated within our section of the formula here, where we've placed a list within a list. So that's how you can nest within a list. You can do multiple indexing with these nested lists. So if we were to do 0 to pull the first item within that list, that's going to pull into this nested list. And then you could use another set of curly brackets to get your position within that nested list. So you can see there we've gone from our initial list to the first position within it, and then to the first position within that nested list there. Hopefully from this you've got that whenever you're stuck within Power Query, set your mindset to be, am I working with a table, or am I working with a record, or am I working with a list? Commonly errors are usually because you're using the wrong function type for your type of data. Now at the start of the video I mentioned there was going to be a little bonus tip about the IntelliSense prompting within Power Query, which can be a little frustrating. I'm just going to do a new query. Now if we start typing within the formula bar, say table dot, and then I'm going to press the arrow keys down to 2 rows, Now traditionally you probably used to type in Excel, and then as soon as you arrow down to the right function that you want and then you press the tab key, it commits a highlighted function. However, you'll notice here we've ended up with what I've pressed tab on, table 2 rows, but we've also got the existing bit of text that I typed before that IntelliSense prompt. This duplication can be annoying. So when you start typing, if you don't include the dot and then press down, so say we go to table transpose, now press the tab key, you don't get that duplication. It doesn't think you're trying to glue together your original bit of text and the bit of IntelliSense that you've pressed tab against. And that's it, folks. Tables, records and lists are the DNA of Power Query. Once you understand these three, M language becomes easy, predictable and simple to debug. Let me know in the comments what you'd like to explore within Power Query next. Please remember to press that like button so I know the content's useful, and also subscribe to the channel to get more weekly updates. See you again next week.